The email popped up in the corner of my screen with the kind of subject line that screamed urgency in all caps, urgent, final signature needed for Horizon project. I stared at it, unmoving, as the clock on my monitor ticked past 1:04 p.m. It was almost poetic. 14 months of being invisible to this team, ignored in meetings, excluded from lunches, passed over for every stretch assignment, and now, suddenly, everyone wanted my signature. Not just any signature. Mine. A few seconds later, Kevin appeared at the edge of my cubicle like he always did, casual, grinning, pretending we were closer than we were. He leaned slightly against the partition like this was just another friendly drop-in. "Hey, Natalie," he said, too upbeat. "We missed you at the team lunch planning session yesterday." I turned slowly in my chair. Was I invited to that planning session? His smile faltered just enough to confirm the answer before he forced it back into place. "Oh, I thought the invite went out to everyone. Anyway, we really need your sign-off on the Horizon contract. You're the last one. The client's waiting." I let the pause hang before replying. "I'll review the contract this afternoon." Kevin blinked. "We kind of need it now. It's just a formality at this point. Reviewing multi-million-dollar contracts before signing them isn't a formality," I said calmly, turning back to my screen. "It's called due diligence." He hesitated. "Right. Okay. Just, let us know soon." When he was gone, I opened the contract from the shared drive. As the security protocol specialist for Apex Solutions Technology Division, my role wasn't decorative. My signature wasn't ceremonial, it was the final verification that the system architecture met the standards we had promised. If anything went wrong, my name would be on the line. And within minutes of scanning the document, I knew something was wrong. The proposed security framework wasn't the baseline design the team had discussed. It was mine. The one I had presented in a meeting 3 months ago, the one Marcus Chen, our director of technology, had brushed aside as over-engineered and impractical before ending the meeting 5 minutes early. My framework. My language. My flowchart structure. But now, it had been reassembled, poorly, and submitted under Marcus's name. And worse, they had implemented it incorrectly. Half the safeguards were missing. Redundant layers were skipped. There were gaps wide enough for a breach that would cost millions in client damages and put Apex's reputation on the line. I sat back in my chair, the weight of it settling in. They hadn't just ignored me. They had stolen my work. And now they needed me to approve it. I opened a blank document and started typing. This wasn't going to be a lunchroom confrontation or an emotional breakdown. This was going to be technical. Precise. Unshakable. Because for the first time in over a year, I wasn't going to be silent. I spent the next hour meticulously cross-referencing the Horizon project proposal with my original framework, emails, internal presentations, version-controlled documents. There it was, my diagram structure, my threat response matrix, even my phrasing in the network isolation protocol. The only difference was the name at the top. Marcus Chen's. I remembered that meeting vividly. I had walked in early, with printed handouts and a slide deck polished until midnight the night before. I'd explained the layered redundancies, the logic tree for multi-vector attacks, the sandbox isolation strategy. Halfway through my presentation, Marcus had checked his phone, leaned back in his chair, and interrupted me mid-sentence. "It's an interesting idea, Natalie," he'd said. "But a bit too complex for what the client needs. Let's keep things lean." Then he had ended the meeting early. Nobody asked questions. Nobody followed up. Until now. I highlighted 3 major vulnerabilities in the current Horizon draft and added comments on implementation flaws. I wasn't being petty. I was protecting a client from signing off on a multi-million-dollar system that wasn't just flawed, it was dangerous. At 2:07 p.m., my phone buzzed. Kevin again. "Hey, just checking in. Did you get a chance to sign?" I didn't reply. At 2:14, my direct manager, Amanda, called. She opened with her usual chipper tone, the same one she used to placate high-maintenance clients. "Hey Natalie. Hope you're doing well. Listen, we're all just waiting on your sign-off. Everything else is locked and loaded." "There's a problem with the security architecture," I said. "I've documented 3 major vulnerabilities that would require revision before I can ethically sign." There was a beat of silence. Then a shift in tone. "Oh. I see. Can we maybe loop in Marcus and talk it through?" "Sure," I said. "Let's bring in legal too. There are also issues of attribution I'd like to discuss." Another pause. Attribution? My framework was repurposed without credit. I'm not just concerned about security integrity. I'm concerned about intellectual property. Amanda exhaled. "Okay, give me a few minutes." At 2:31, Marcus called. "Natalie," he began smoothly, "I hear you have some concerns. Look, I appreciate your diligence, but we're kind of past the point of revision. We need to get this out the door." "I understand that," I said. "But the security implementation in the current draft is flawed. If we ship this as is, we're risking compliance violations and client-side breaches. We'll fix it in implementation." "Marcus, this isn't a missed semicolon in code. These are architectural failures. And I'm not putting my signature on something that could collapse under audit." There was silence on the line. "Let's meet in conference 4B, he said. "Legal will be there." I hung up, gathered my notes, and packed my laptop. I wasn't just bringing proof. I was bringing the leverage no one thought I had. When I stepped into conference room 4B, the tension was already thick in the air. Marcus sat at the head of the table, arms crossed, his usual executive calm just a little too controlled. Kevin hovered near the whiteboard, pretending to review charts. Amanda offered a tight smile I didn't return. Across from them sat Daniel Fields, Apex's in-house counsel, flipping through a printout of the Horizon project proposal. I walked to the far end of the table, opened my laptop, and connected to the display. No small talk. No apologies. "This," I began, clicking to the first slide, "is my original framework proposal, submitted on January 12 via internal email and attached to the Q1 Innovation Pitch folder." I clicked again. "This," I said, switching slides, "is the current Horizon architecture as it appears in the final contract." Side by side, the overlap was impossible to deny: naming conventions, segmentation tiers, the unique phrasing I had used in my threat isolation path. It was all there. Except under someone else's name. I clicked once more. "These are the implementation errors in the current version, 3 major vulnerabilities. The network sandbox bypass fails to isolate simultaneous attack vectors. The AI authentication protocol was altered without updating the key exchange matrix, which means the entire structure is vulnerable to brute force decryption. And the backup failsafe logic is entirely missing." I turned to Daniel. "If this proposal is submitted and a breach occurs under client deployment, the liability would extend to Apex. And because the security architecture is currently attributed to Marcus Chen, but deployed under my certification, that legal exposure includes me." Daniel leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "You're saying your original work was used without attribution?" "Yes," I replied. "And implemented incorrectly. My signature here would be both unethical and legally dangerous." Marcus spoke next. "We didn't intentionally take anything, Natalie. Ideas evolve in teams. This was a collaborative process." "No, it wasn't," I said flatly. "I wasn't in the room when this version was assembled. I wasn't on the calendar. I wasn't on the invite list. I wasn't even on the group thread. And the framework wasn't credited. It was copied." Silence. Kevin stared down at the table. Daniel looked at Marcus. "If what she says is true, and I've already verified the submission timestamps, it's clear this proposal can't move forward in its current form. The client is expecting a signature by 3 p.m., Marcus said, his voice tight. Then we tell them we found last-minute flaws and we're correcting them, I said. The architecture is fundamentally sound. But the implementation is flawed. Amanda jumped in. How long would it take to fix? 3 hours, I said. If I take the lead. Daniel looked around the room. You have 2 choices, delay delivery and get it right, or send this now and open Apex to liability exposure that could exceed the entire value of the contract. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply closed my laptop and slid a folder across the table. My corrections. My terms. Daniel picked it up and reviewed the top page. And your conditions? He asked carefully. I looked straight at Marcus. I want proper attribution in all internal and client documentation. And I want to lead the implementation team moving forward. No one argued. They couldn't afford to. And just like that, I went from invisible to indispensable. Not because they saw my value. But because I refused to let them keep pretending I didn't have any. I walked out of that conference room without waiting for anyone's approval. The hallway was quiet as I made my way back to my cubicle, still tucked in the same corner of the tech floor where I'd been placed on my first day, far from the glass offices and sunlight. I sat down, took a breath, and opened a new workspace on my screen. My fingers moved quickly. I wasn't angry. I wasn't flustered. I was focused. At 3:14 p.m., I sent a revised security protocol document, clean, patched, flawless. I CC'd legal, the project manager, and yes, Marcus. The subject line read: Horizon Architecture, Final, Secure Version, Lead, and Washington. An hour later, the client responded. Thank you. This version exceeds expectations. Approved for implementation. No mention of the delay. No complaints. Just gratitude. At 5:42 p.m., Amanda stopped by my desk with the kind of stiff politeness that people use when they've been told to behave. Great job today, she said, voice tight. We're lucky to have you on the team. I gave her a brief nod. Thanks. She lingered a second too long before retreating. By the next morning, the change was unmistakable. My inbox was full of meeting invites I'd never been included in before, architecture reviews, senior team syncs, even a one-on-one with the CTO. My name, my real name, started appearing at the top of documents instead of buried in the footnotes. I wasn't just being acknowledged. I was being counted. That week, HR requested a performance summary for me. The email came from a director I'd never spoken to before. I replied with a detailed list of projects I had led, initiatives I had contributed to, and the full timeline of the Horizon resolution, side by side with attribution logs. It wasn't revenge. It was record-keeping. The following Monday, I was invited to a strategy meeting, not by Amanda, or Kevin, or Marcus, but by Apex's VP of Engineering. She opened with, Natalie, we were impressed with how you handled the Horizon situation under pressure. We'd like you to oversee the next phase of deployment, not just for Horizon, but for the upcoming 2 security pilots. We also want to discuss a promotion track. I met her gaze. I'm listening. 3 weeks later, I moved out of the corner cubicle and into a glass office of my own. No ceremony. No announcements. Just a new nameplate on the door. Natalie Washington, Principal Security Architect. Marco brought me lunch that day, my favorite banh mi from a Vietnamese shop across town. He saw the new office, grinned, and said, finally. I smiled back. Not finally. Just, accurately. Later that afternoon, an email invitation pinged in my inbox. Subject, Horizon Team Celebration Lunch Party Popper. Recipients, the entire tech division. My name? First on the list. And this time, I hit accept. The team lunch was held at a sleek bistro just a few blocks from the office, neutral wood tones, soft jazz playing overhead, The kind of place Apex usually reserved for client dinners and quarterly wrap-ups. As I walked in, the room buzzed with small talk and clinking glasses. For a moment, I stood at the edge, scanning the faces that had once turned away from me in elevators, that had laughed through lunches I'd never been invited to. Now, those same faces turned toward me. "Natalie!" Kevin called out, waving a little too enthusiastically from a long table near the back. "Over here." The seat next to him was open, reserved. It used to be the empty seat. The one no one ever offered me. I took it, setting my bag down calmly, meeting his smile with a quiet nod. "You really pulled it off," he said. "That fix you sent, lightning fast." I mean, we were all kind of blown away. I picked up the menu. It's easier to move fast when you already know what you're doing. He laughed, a little awkwardly. "Right. Yeah." Marcus was there too, across the table, swirling a glass of iced tea with the kind of forced casualness that said everything he wasn't saying out loud. He hadn't spoken to me since the meeting. Hadn't needed to. His demotion had been subtle, a strategic repositioning to focus on systems strategy. His name was no longer attached to Horizon. Mine was. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. A few seats down, Amanda raised her glass. "Everyone," she said, "I think we can all agree this project wouldn't have been possible without Natalie. Her leadership, her clarity under pressure, she saved the contract and, honestly, saved us. So, here's to Natalie." A chorus of glasses lifted. I nodded politely, letting the moment pass without flourish. But inside, I felt it, not pride, exactly. Something sharper. More precise. A recognition that the years of silence, of being underestimated, had not been for nothing. They had made me watch. Made me document. Made me strategic. After lunch, while the others lingered at the bar, I stepped outside. The breeze was warm, the city humming with its usual, indifferent rhythm. I pulled out my phone to check messages, and there it was. From Apex Executive Admin. Subject, Award Nomination, Cybersecurity Innovation, Horizon Team. "Natalie, you've been nominated as lead contributor for the Cybersecurity Innovation Award, to be presented at the National Tech Security Conference in October. Congratulations." Formal packet to follow. I stood there for a long moment, letting it settle. They'd taken my ideas, my silence, my absence, and weaponized them for convenience. But I had reclaimed all of it. With clarity. With calm. And now, I was building something even stronger than security architecture. I was building reputation. On my name. This time, no one else could sign it for me. The months that followed moved quickly, like the first real stretch of clear highway after years of traffic. My calendar filled with things that finally mattered: architecture reviews I was leading, mentorship sessions with junior analysts, a quiet lunch with the VP of Engineering who wanted my input on restructuring our security division. The Horizon project had become a case study, not just in client success, but in how internal power can shift when one voice refuses to stay small. The office dynamic changed too. People spoke to me differently now. Slower. Measured. They asked for input instead of assuming mine wasn't needed. A few even apologized in their own roundabout ways, Kevin with a nervous joke, Amanda with a too polite compliment, Marcus, with silence. Which, honestly, suited me just fine. Recognition came in more than one form. Apex's internal newsletter ran a feature titled "Reclaiming Excellence: How One Architect Turned a Crisis into Innovation." My name was in the headline. My photo was on the page. For once, I didn't cringe reading a company email. Then came the National Tech Security Conference. I arrived in San Francisco with a simple black carry-on and a speech I'd written the week before in my kitchen, long after the twins had gone to bed and Marco had fallen asleep on the couch. The award ceremony was held in a glass ballroom overlooking the bay, all chrome fixtures and ambient light. When they called my name, Natalie Washington, Principal Security Architect, Apex Solutions, the applause was warm, not explosive. But it didn't have to be loud. It had weight. It was real. I walked to the podium, my heels clicking across the marble, and took the award with both hands. It was heavier than I expected. "I'd like to thank my team," I began, "especially the ones who didn't see me right away. Because being overlooked taught me something no certification ever could. It taught me how to stand still in a room full of noise and listen to myself instead." I paused. And it turns out, that voice, the quiet one, the calm one, the one they said was too much or not enough, is the one that built the structure Apex needed when everything was on the line. Afterward, a senior executive from a global security firm asked for my card. 2 university students shyly requested a photo. And when I returned to the table where Apex's contingent sat, the VP stood and pulled out my chair. "Let's talk next week," she said. "About your next step." That night, I returned to my hotel room alone. I stood by the window, watching the lights move across the bay, and thought about all the empty chairs I'd been left out of. And how, now, I was the one deciding who got a seat at mine. It wasn't vindication. It was ownership. And no one was going to take it from me again. 6 months after the Horizon project went live, I was standing at the front of a packed auditorium at Apex headquarters, delivering a presentation on scalable AI defense systems. Not a side contribution. Not a bullet point under someone else's slide. A keynote, mine. The audience included senior leadership, cross-functional engineers, new hires, and more than a few people who had once pretended I didn't exist. But now they listened. They took notes. They asked questions, and waited for my answers. Afterward, as people filtered out, I lingered behind to pack up. A young intern, Kayla, if I remembered correctly, approached slowly, clutching a notepad to her chest. "Ms. Washington," she said, voice a little shaky, "I just wanted to say, seeing someone like you up there? It means a lot. I didn't even know you could be that calm and still command a room." I smiled. That calm is earned. That presence? It comes from knowing that even if they don't invite you to the table, you are the table. She laughed, a little awestruck, and I could see something settle behind her eyes, like maybe the trajectory of her own story had just shifted. That night, I got home late. Marco was grading design portfolios at the kitchen island, and the kids were curled up on the couch watching cartoons. I slipped off my heels, sat beside them, and let Sophia braid my hair with tiny hands while Miguel explained the plot of whatever animated chaos was on screen. It was quiet. Ordinary. Perfect. After the kids went to bed, I stood on the balcony with a glass of wine and opened my journal. The same one I'd started the day after I refused to sign that contract. I flipped to the last entry. "Sometimes being excluded is painful. But sometimes it gives you the distance to see what others can't. And the courage to stand your ground when it matters most." I added beneath it. "They thought I was invisible. Now, I'm the standard." I closed the journal, not with finality, but with clarity. Because this wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of the one I wrote for myself. And that's how I learned that being underestimated is sometimes your greatest advantage. Silence isn't weakness. It's a strategy. Have you ever been dismissed, then proved them all wrong? Leave your story below. Hit like if this spoke to you. Subscribe for more true revenge. And share this with someone who knows their worth.